Welcome back. Some doctors are joining calls from the travel and tourism industry to drop COVID-19 test requirements for international trips.
I'm joined now live by one of those doctors, Zain Chagla, infectious diseases physician at St. Joseph's Healthcare in Hamilton. Dr. Chagla, thanks for joining us this afternoon. What is the sort of main reason why you think dropping these tests actually makes sense at this point? Because we still are in the Omicron era, no?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is part of the reason. Look, I travel when we didn't know what COVID was, when we were preparing, all of those things was a reasonable thing to save. Recognizing that, there was transmission from abroad. I think when we had controls in Canada until we got vaccinated again, there was some need to be a little bit more careful there. But we now have one of the most vaccinated populations in the world. We, know that a lot of people got COVID-19 in Canada over the last 2 months, and we have to be very cognizant of that fact. And so, yeah, the risks of acquiring COVID-19 while traveling versus the risks of acquiring COVID-19 while going about and living your lives in Canada, are starting to even out. And it really does mean that we do need to give people the ability to see their families, to be out of the country, just as much back to them as they're getting the ability to do more things as the restrictions start falling.
All right, and Dr. Chagla, can you tell us what you think should be in place if we do scrap those PCR tests pre-departure and on arrival?
Yeah, so I think number one is making sure that, again, the PCRs are off, and the reasoning, not only just because of the expense, but because it may actually harm travelers. People may test positive for weeks to months, and we know, unfortunately, people here haven't been able to get a test, even if they're having symptoms. Number two, I think there's a need to really think about quarantine requirements, particularly for things like children, where they're forced to be out of daycare or school for 14 days, even though if they were exposed to COVID-19 or even acquired COVID-19 locally, they'd only be out for 5 days or less. I think there's just that embrace. There's probably better needs for us to test in our communities. So, for example, having symptomatic travelers, when they return home, be able to access a test, accessing more surveillance and wastewater, being able to do more genomic surveillance in groups that are still getting tested, like healthcare workers. Those will give us a better sense of variants coming forward, but really not using the border as our way of enforcing this, and giving people more, again, unencumbered travel that is consistent and doesn't change every month or two when something else happens.
Mm-hmm. As you're well aware, Dr. Chagla, there is a lot of pressure on governments, specifically the federal and provincial levels, to start removing restrictions. We're seeing what's going on at various protests right across the country right now. What do you think the appetite is? This is obviously a federal issue when it comes to international travel, for the government to perhaps look at easing restrictions. Have you heard any response? Are you aware of any appetite on either Minister Algabra's part or others to look at perhaps rolling these back?
Yeah, I mean, I think Theresa Tam talked a couple of weeks ago about the need to really re-examine what's happening at the border. I know the provincial premiers have also looked to the federal government and talked to them about this. Obviously, haven't heard any progress, but I agree. There is a lot of discontent, and some of it does need to be sorted out. But it shouldn't necessarily affect individuals right now, and certainly there shouldn't be a need to drag things on if they do need to be stopped. Again, this is taxpayer money that's going into this. This is a decision that needs to come sooner rather than later, and recognizing that people who are making travel plans for the next few weeks or months, they want to see some stability in terms of them being able to access travel, which means that industry is really still feeling the brunt of things until these rules are relaxed, or at least there's a long-term future for them. So, I think there is a need to start talking about this, and even just putting out a plan in place so people can start preparing.
Okay, Dr. Chagla, appreciate you making the case here this afternoon. Thanks for joining us again on CP24.
Thank you.
No worries. All the best.